The bank teller barely spared a glance at the sophisticated polymer ID card before a sneer tightened her lips. With a dismissive sound, a quick, sharp scoff, she flicked the identification across the expanse of the polished marble floor as if it were disposable refuse. The metallic sound of the card skittering was loud in the hushed lobby. All conversation died. Customers, midway through their transactions, froze into statues. A sharp, audible gasp echoed from the queue. Yet, the teller offered no flicker of remorse. Instead, she leaned into the confrontation, doubling down on the unwarranted aggression, loudly questioning the woman's name, her stated executive authority, and even her fundamental right to occupy that space. A security guard, already watchful, shifted his stance and began to approach the counter. "Bank policy," the teller announced, projecting her voice to ensure the humiliation was public and deliberate. Several cell phones silently emerged, recording the spectacle, but no one dared to intervene. The bank, in its sterile ignorance, had no concept of the true cost of this petty display. The woman whose identification now lay abandoned on their highly waxed floor was Danielle Ross. She controlled the final approval of a $5.9 billion regional merger, a deal absolutely critical to this institution's solvency and survival in the coming fiscal year. She was not just a disgruntled customer. She was the silent arbiter of their destiny, and she was mere seconds from dissolving the entire agreement. Danielle Ross had entered the bank lobby alone, without the usual protective bubble of assistance or security detail, seeking only a single confirmation. The air in the facility felt charged, smelling faintly of sterile cleaning agents and the quiet, pervasive judgment reserved for those standing in line. She approached the counter, the epicenter of the current tension, placed her ID card deliberately onto the granite surface, and waited. The teller, reading the embossed name, glanced up at Danielle's composed face and offered a smile devoid of any human warmth. "I can tell you right now, this isn't going to work," the teller stated, crossing her arms. Danielle's composure remained absolute. She blinked slowly once, analyzing the aggression. "What exactly isn't going to work?" The teller snatched the ID card again, subjecting it to a prolonged, theatrical examination. Then, with a sharp wrist movement, sent it sailing across the floor a second time. It skidded violently, spinning until it settled near the stanchions of the long queue. Multiple customers gasped sharply. A lone man near the water cooler let out a nervous, suppressed laugh. "You can retrieve that once we're finished with you?" the teller snapped, her voice carrying easily. "We don't tolerate games here." Danielle didn't twitch, didn't follow the card with her eyes. "I am here for a wire confirmation which was scheduled," she replied, her voice remaining low and steady, a deliberate contrast to the teller's volume. The teller planted her hands flat on the desk. "No, you absolutely are not. People do not simply walk in expecting executive access with names and profiles like yours." A well-dressed man directly behind Danielle smoothly raised his phone to record. Another customer muttered, "Did she actually just toss identification?" The teller rapidly hammered keys on her terminal. "High-risk profile," she announced loudly, turning to the lobby. "That requires additional, mandatory verification." "Then conduct the verification," Danielle returned, keeping her tone perfectly neutral. "In the meantime, I would like to speak to a branch manager." The teller managed a condescending smirk. "Naturally, you would." She pressed a silent alarm button beneath the counter. The guard, alerted, moved another step closer, his gaze instantly hardening with suspicion. "Until we properly verify your identity," the teller declared, triumph creeping into her voice, "you will stay exactly where you are." Danielle finally lowered her eyes to the card lying on the floor. She still refused to bend even an inch. "I am curious," Danielle asked, raising her gaze back to the teller. "What specific policy authorizes the physical disposal of a client's valid identification?" The teller leaned in conspiratorially. "The policy where we expose frauds and imposters." The phones were now fully deployed, aimed at the counter. The branch manager appeared, his expression signaling irritation first, followed by a fleeting flicker of managerial curiosity. What is the disturbance? The teller answered immediately, cutting off Danielle. She presented unverified identification, demanded executive access without documentation, and became immediately confrontational when questioned. My identification was thrown onto the floor, Danielle stated plainly. The manager sighed, clearly weary of low-level disputes. Ma'am, if you'd please just step aside for a moment. No, Danielle interjected. The single word landed flat, utterly firm, and indisputable. The manager physically recoiled, stiffening. Excuse me? Danielle met his eyes without flinching. I said no. The guard's hand subconsciously tightened near the bulky radio attached to his belt. The teller sneered openly. See? Always the same predictable attitude. Finally, Danielle bent down in one fluid motion, retrieved her ID, and placed it back on the counter, positioning it directly in front of the teller. Run the verification, she instructed, the word properly hanging unspoken in the air. The teller rolled her eyes dramatically but tapped the card into the scanner. Her smug expression evaporated instantly. The verification system didn't just process. It seized up. The screen momentarily went blank, then flashed a violent, alarming shade of red. What did you do? The teller hissed, genuine fear replacing her arrogance. I asked you to verify, Danielle replied simply. The manager nervously leaned over the counter, peering at the terminal display. What is your full, legal name? Danielle Ross. The manager's face tightened, a subtle, almost invisible shift of recognition crossing his features. He backed away from the counter and fumbled for his small, secure tablet. A chilling silence descended upon the entire lobby. At the adjacent customer service desk, a young, junior employee was staring intently at her own computer screen, her eyes wide with shock. Sir, the employee whispered urgently. Her name is definitely on the internal memo. The manager glared, suddenly fearful. Which memo? Be specific. The one detailing the merger oversight team. The employee confirmed quietly, her voice shaky. The one pertaining to next quarter's regional stability. The teller let out a sharp, hysterical laugh. That's utterly impossible. She's lying. Danielle remained perfectly silent, allowing the facts to speak. The manager nervously swallowed, moisture suddenly drying in his mouth. Ma'am, he asked, his tone now bordering on deference. Are you in any way affiliated with Ross Holdings? Danielle offered one concise nod. Founder and Chief Executive Officer. The entire lobby froze, soundlessly. The color visibly drained from the teller's face. She is fabricating this, the teller protested weakly. The junior employee shook her head, tears almost pooling in her eyes. She is not. The manager took another significant step back. The pending $5.9 billion merger is currently under my firm's authority, Danielle announced, her voice rising slightly so the nearby customers could hear every word. And as of this precise moment, that merger is officially under immediate, rigorous review. The teller slammed both hands down on the desk with a desperate sound. You can't ruin me over one minor misunderstanding. Danielle slowly turned her focus entirely onto the teller. You threw my government-issued identification onto the floor. That is not minor. You deliberately escalated the situation. You involved uniformed security without cause. You chose to publicly, intentionally humiliate an authorized client before performing the most basic function of your job. The manager finally found his voice. We value our clients, we believe in. Danielle raised a single, silencing finger. He stopped speaking instantly. This bank desperately requires the $5.9 billion merger to stabilize its considerable regional exposure, she continued, addressing the manager but projecting the message to everyone present. My firm controls the final approval on that deal. A low, incredulous murmur spread through the assembled crowd. Danielle turned her attention to the nervous junior employee. How long did the legitimate verification process take? Once the card was finally scanned. 6 seconds. The employee confirmed immediately. Danielle returned her stare to the teller, the silence heavy with implication. You consciously chose antagonism and humiliation over a 6-second verification. The teller's voice cracked, sounding fragile and young. I was following official bank policy. Danielle nodded slowly. So was I. She drew her personal phone from her pocket and sent one single, short text message. Immediately, the teller's screen abruptly flickered and went dark. What happened? The teller whispered, her eyes wide with terror. The manager checked his tablet, his expression crumbling. Your operational access has been immediately suspended. The security guard suddenly retreated several steps, appearing profoundly unsure of his role or position in the room. Danielle addressed the manager directly. This entire interaction, your employee's conduct, your handling of the policy violation, has been meticulously documented, time-stamped, and witnessed by dozens. The manager's voice was barely a choked whisper. We can correct this entire situation. We can absolutely make this right. You had your opportunity, Danielle stated. She turned briefly to face the stunned customers filling the lobby. I came here specifically to confirm whether this institution operated with the integrity required for a major partnership. She looked back at the terrified teller. It does not. The junior employee spoke softly, fear still evident. Sir, corporate risk management is calling you now. The manager answered the phone. His face collapsed completely as he listened to the voice on the other end. Yes, understood. Immediately, he slowly lowered the device. The merger has been officially paused. The teller made a small, choked sound and slid slowly down until she was slumped in her chair. Defeat absolute. Danielle reached over the counter, smoothly picked up her identification, slipped it into her designer bag, and began walking purposefully toward the exit doors. As she passed the security guard, he instinctively stepped far aside, requiring no instruction whatsoever. At the exit, Danielle paused briefly, turning back one last time. Next time, she stated calmly, her voice echoing perfectly in the silent room. Verify first. She exited the building. Behind her, a prestigious regional bank realized in painful, immediate clarity that its petty procedural arrogance had just cost it everything. If the story resonated deeply with you, don't let the moment end here. Subscribe to the channel right now and ensure all notifications are switched on so you never miss another authentic story where dignity swiftly and brutally crushes baseless arrogance in real time. These moments of accountability matter intensely, and the next narrative we share could prove even more impactful. Like this video immediately to help push the message further into the algorithm. Share it with anyone you know who needs to witness the true, devastating cost of unverified assumptions, and comment verify first if the ending delivered the justice you were waiting for. Stay tuned to this channel, because the truth always finds its way back, and it always returns louder than before.